everyone. I'm Adriana Monique Alvarez, the CEO of Alma Publishing, and I am so excited. I'm just clicking this over on Facebook. So excited to have Emily Tuck with me. Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm okay, Adriana. How are you?
Good. So today is the launch of Sacred Redesign, and you are one of the contributors. So congratulations. I know
Thank you very much.
Yes, you are an international best-selling author. It's topped the charts in Australia, UK, US.
Has it made it in? Did it make it in the UK?
It did. Yes.
Woo! Can I say that's the power of having Camilla on your team?
You know what? I'm all about it.
She is someone to keep, I tell you.
Yeah, I started off the campaign being very honest, saying that UK market is sometimes hard to crack.
Mm-hmm.
And here we go. She made all the difference.
She usually does.
So one of the things, obviously as a person who gets to see the chapters roll in, see the different people who are contributing to a book, hearing their different perspectives, there's always these like, oh, this is so fascinating. Like, I want to hear more. And you were one of those people for me. So I'd love for you to share, first of all, where in the world you're joining us from and why you chose the story you chose.
For the book?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name's Emily, and I have my accent is English, but I actually have lived for the last 3.5 years in Scotland.
Okay.
Which, when we were talking about different, personality traits of different nations, take everything you know about the British and double it, and you have the Scot. So they're more withdrawn, they're more in a mood because the weather's worse, etc. So all those things that you were explaining, just double it, basically.
Oh my God. She said more in a mood. Okay, I just love that. Okay, so.
But it's the best way I can describe it. Yeah. But essentially what happens, I mean, where you live in the world, it's always sunny, right?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a little snippet, but it rains 7 days out of 10. 7 out of 10. And within an afternoon, you can have 3 different weathers, all of which are pretty rubbish. And as a consequence, and this is just a little aside, putting out your washing is an Olympic sport because you don't know if it's going to rain by the time you get back to your house. The 5 feet between the washing line and your house, it might rain. You have to bring it in.
Oh yeah, so it's over. That was fun. Okay, bring it back in. No, okay. So with that much rain, it's an impossibility to do to dry laundry outside. Like
just doesn't happen. Well, yeah. So it's an interesting way of being. So that's why I meant about this is what the Brits are like. Well, you kind of double it, and you have the Scots.
Well, I love it. It's been so fun having you all in this book because, like I said, I find you so exotic and so fascinating. And then when you pair with it, like the work that you do. So every single time I've been with you on a referral circle call or however it is that we end up on a Zoom or a StreamYard together, you bring up this name, Lilith. And so I want you to tell us, who is Lilith and why has she been forgotten?
Okay, so Lilith, biblically or mythologically, is the first wife of Adam. So that phrase alone, it causes that expression on people's faces. Huh? Because nobody knows that there was a first wife of Adam because she's been written out of history.
Wow.
So that alone makes her interesting to me. And all the years I've worked with Lilith, it was only about 2 weeks ago I was doing some work with a family member. She was preparing something for her church. I was helping her. Point is, I was looking at the Genesis story, actually getting a Bible out and looking at it, which I probably haven't looked at in years. Long story short, I could actually see when you research Lilith, they explain that there were originally 2 versions of Genesis. There was the version that we know, and then there was the version with Lilith in it. And the Lilith's version was eventually binned into, and then now we've only got the Eve version, Adam and Eve. So what happened was I happened to be looking at the Genesis story of the creation, the 7 days, right? And essentially there was a second version for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 paragraphs, and then it just went into Adam and Eve, and it was like there was never, like, this thing never existed. But it's the first time I've ever actually seen it physically on a page. I was like, wow, it's true, there's a thing. So what happened is Lilith was the first wife of Adam. So the idea that Adam is born out of the mud, and we have this story that he was the first man created out of the mud. Well, in the Lilith version, so was Lilith. Lilith was also created out of the mud, and therefore equal to Adam. So what happens is that when she refuses to accept the subservient nature when it came to lovemaking, she didn't want that, and she wasn't happy about that. I'd wanted to be able to use her voice and express her opinions, which apparently was not going to go down very well. There was a massive power struggle between her and Adam, and eventually she invoked the secret name of God and was allowed to, either, depending on which version you read, either she was allowed to leave or she left of her own accord, but she left the Garden of Eden. And then you get the Eve version where he's born out of the rib, and she's born out of the rib, and so therefore the subservient viewpoint is maintained. So that's where you've got a rewrite. So what essentially happened is, depending on what you then research, you get versions of Lilith that are, she's a femme fatale, she'll break up your relationships, she's a child eater, she's demonic. There's this whole backstory, because the purpose is to demonize her so that you don't want to do that. Right. But actually what Lilith is about, Lilith is a goddess that looks after, or an archetype that's been lost, because she's about equality. She's about standing in your power. She's about using your voice. So she's about how you communicate, your creativity, your legacy to the world. She's about our sexuality. And I mean, by that, I don't necessarily mean orientation, although it can be implied. It's about sexual expression. Is it authentic? Is it creative? Is it balanced? And therefore, how will that impact your life? And I found her fascinating. The first time I ever came across her, I didn't know who she was. I came across her because I watched a television show, and the character, I realized later, was playing the part of a Lilith-like character. And she walked onto the screen in her first scene in the film, entirely naked, other than a pair of diamond earrings and Louis Vuitton shoes. She just sashayed into the room. And in the thing that I was watching, the television show I was watching, she played a dominatrix. And not a kind of, seedy sex slave, kind of, sex industry kind of dominatrix. She owned it. She lived in the poshest part of London. She had millions of dollars. And the idea was that she was the dominatrix who brought a nation to its knees. So she played for high stakes. So it's how much power do you need to embody Lilith? So this is the invitation that she gives you. So I found her fascinating, and then had to go and find out about her. So then I found out the Genesis story, and I put the other pieces together. And what it's done over the last couple of years is with my best friend and business partner, Camilla Fellis-Arnold, she said to me, what you've got here is gold. People need to know. So I built the programs that I now deliver, which are, one of them kind of comes through the door of business, because it's about your legacy. It's about the legacy you leave the world and the shape that it has. But my flagship program is predominantly, it's called Radical Revolutionary Relationships. And it's essentially rebuilding those relationships on that even keel. So where are you being disempowered in the space? How do you need to step up and be equal to your partner? How do they also need to facilitate that? And I read somewhere that, this was years ago when I was researching her, this particular psychologist had used the Adam and Lilith version as a kind of tool for marriage counseling. So if that's the paradigm that you're living in, if that's the relationship you're building, that's what it can look like. It completely changes the relationship narrative. Yeah. And when I'm working with my clients, what come about is, because she deals with sexuality and she deals with authentic sexual expression, what happens is, where people have been disconnected from their stuff, either through trauma that they've had in their life or just inherited beliefs, suddenly we start to unlock that. So this is where it feeds back into the chapter that I wrote, because what you're doing using the different tools that I have, but more specifically with the chapter, is sacred redesign. I used epigenetics and sort of in transforming DNA memories, which I do have to say was originally taught to me by a woman called Sylvia Marina. Hi Sylvia, here's the shout out. Essentially what it does is, what are the inherited patterns and limitations that you've got because of what decisions your ancestors made generations ago, and what are the potentials and gifts that were there from generations ago, and unlocking that so that you can access those and release those limitations so you can stand more in your power, which is what Lilith is asking you to do. So my chapter became my journey of either how I've worked with clients or how I experienced it in my own life, unlocking that sacred redesign of our DNA.
Wow. And and you're so right. Like if everything starts off at this, we're coming in and starting as equals, different but equals, right?
Yeah. Complementary equals,
changes everything.
Of course it does. It's a completely different relationship. How many people feel like they're they got married and now suddenly he stopped doing everything around the house, or the wife is behaving like this and it feels like you're dealing with a child? And what happens is Lilith also looks after the archetype of the coordinate for the sacred prostitute. And to be clear, it's sacred prostitute. So the sacred prostitute originally was about people would want to be chosen to go and learn from the sacred prostitutes. It was not the prostitution that we know now. This was a gift and an honor. And so what happened is she guards that and she looks after that, because we step into that equality, we step into that possibility with her. And it's just never-endingly fascinating to me. And when I work with clients, watching them rebuild their love lives, their intimacy, things that witch wounds that get solved, all kinds of beautiful things, and then suddenly they have the relationship they wanted. It's an amazing privilege.
I love this. And as you're talking, this is so important, because one of the things that I've observed, when Derek and I got married and we decided, we're going to do this a certain way, and he was just as present with the boys as I was, and I'm just as present in the business as he is, it really throws people off. They don't
know what to do with it.
Oh, they do not. They do not know what to do with it. And oftentimes, like I'll see my, my grandma, or the older generations kind of like, wait a second. What, why is he getting the thing out of the oven? And when you're talking, it just goes back to how ingrained this is. And then it just becomes, well, this is just how it is. And this is how you fall into line. And yet it's like the whole thing though is, it's kind of like when you build something and that bottom brick is just right
off.
The whole thing.
But you build it right from the bottom, and you build it and you adjust it as you go, because as one levels up, the other needs to level up, because each one, as they do so, is an invitation to your partner then to level and meet, and then the next one to level and meet. So it becomes an evolution over a lifetime. So it's a beautiful way of kind of doing it. Now, it's not always pretty, because there's things to be tidied up there. There's beliefs to be let go of. There's generations of, you're supposed to do the washing up, or whatever it is that's sitting in the space. But it is always worth it. It is always worth it. So I love doing it, watching these relationships just rebuild themselves. And so I thought, right, she needs to be out there. She needs to be explained to people. She needs to be told about, and give people the invitation, right, come and work with me. So with the Radical Revolutionary Relationships program, it works both as a single and as a couple. So I've done it with women doing their side of the journey and watching the ripple impacts that it has on the husband. An example I can give you is with one of my clients. talking about that imbalance and how it feels like you've accidentally married a child, or they were fine and then suddenly they're not. Now, hang on, this isn't the guy I thought I was marrying, whatever. What essentially occurs if you're not present to it is actually it causes bed death. So essentially sex comes off the table. Because at a deep subconscious level, so if you're listening to this and you're in a couple or a long-term relationship, or you're married and you're thinking, where did our love life go? Where did the intimacy disappear to? What essentially happens is, if at any point there is an imbalance in that dynamic, so one of you is parenting the other in any capacity, intimacy comes off the table because you can't sleep with the children. It's a subconscious understanding that the energy this person's giving out is childlike. So, okay, I just won't do that now. And then interestingly, the second they step back into the adult space, so start helping out with the dishes, whatever the manifestations of that are in your house and in your lives, suddenly sex is back on the table. Because you meet as equals again.
Yes. Wow.
And
and I love how you say this, like basically parenting in any way, and because I find this so interesting. You know, there's typically the one who wants to be parented and the one who's willing to parent, right? Because both are required.
Yes, and what we've been taught is that the damsel will be saved by the knight. Well, the knight's the parent in that dynamic. So, you know, that's not going to work. Because eventually one is, you know, resentful of the other, or it doesn't fly. And it's whether or not you stay in that position or whether you start leveling up. And, you know, sometimes when I work with couples, they rebuild something amazing. Other times I've seen it that they don't survive because they're not willing. One of them's not willing to do that. So either they stop coming to me because they don't want to find the end result of the program, or they but what they do is they go on, what I have seen is that they go on to better relationships with other people because they now know what they know.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Like once you know, you can't not know. So as uncomfortable as it might be, you can't go back.
No. But what I do as part of the program, whether it's as a couple or whether it's individually, is what do you want the relationship to look like? How do you want to build it? So we spend the first couple of weeks just going, what do you want the shape to be? What's the flavor of it? What's the taste of it? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And once you know that and you realize what you do or don't have in common in that shape, you can start building. So like you said, that creaky brick, you can practically demolish the whole thing and build it from the ground. So it's not that you're not compatible. I heard a quote the other day, really funny, from Chris Rock, and it said, relationships aren't hard. Relationships are hard. He goes, no, they're not. He said, it's only hard if one of you is doing all the work. He said, two people can move a couch really easily. One person, it's not moving anywhere.
Yeah. So true.
Yeah.
So. I love this, Emily. And so, and the other thing that I love is that, you know, obviously the relationship, it's the foundation of the home and the family. So then when you throw kids into the mix, you know, either it's much better or it's much more complicated. And then we're just passing it on again, right? For better or for worse. Yeah. For
better, for worse, it's being repeated. So that now the other thing with the sacred redesign chapter and the DNA memories, what I did put in there, and I'd only found out about maybe 2 or 3 weeks before I actually wrote it, was I've seen this work go backwards. So for example, I worked with an ancestor that was 5 generations back, and I watched myself transform, but I also watched my father transform as a ripple effect of what I was doing. He was completely unaware. I was sharing it with him, but in principle, I did the work and he got the benefit.
Yes.
Now, what I wasn't able to see, because I don't have children of my own, is I couldn't see what would happen going forward. I worked with somebody recently who did something from however many generations back for their own relationship, and it ended up being about something to do with their mood, like how they see the world and whether they see it as an optimistic or pessimistic place. Independently, the children phoned that week to say they wanted some help with their mood, and maybe they needed some vitamin D, and maybe they needed some support. So although it looks like a simple touch point, it was them also benefiting as the ripple went forward. So I'd say to parents who look at their kids and go, oh my gosh, what can I do to make this better? I wish I knew what I knew. If you want to do the DNA work, then what happens is your children benefit off the ripple. You can rewrite your children's future. It's not set in stone. That's
the part. That's the part I want to circle right there, is the future is not set in stone. We choose it, right? Minute by minute, day by day. The work we're willing to do.
Yeah, decision by decision, it can be rewritten.
Okay, so Emily, tell us where people can follow you.
So I've given you the link to my link tree with everything on it, which I'm hoping will go under this. Essentially, my community is on Mighty Networks. It's called The Woman Bespoke Your Life with Lilith. My programs are all available on emilytuck.com. Just sign up, go find out. I'm putting on some self-led programs in the next couple of weeks, so that, you know, if you don't want to come in for a one-to-one or you don't want to come into a group setting, there's some stuff to get you started. And I also am relaunching my podcast, Lilith Speaks, because she lost her voice thousands of years ago. It's time she had it back. And that will be relaunching at the beginning of May and available on all your different platforms that you can get your podcasts on. So, yeah.
So exciting. Thank you, Emily, for sharing Lilith with us and for contributing in Sacred Redesign. I will make sure that link goes in. And yeah, thank you for reminding us of the power of our work. It goes forward and it goes backward.
It really does. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. So may you continue to explore the energy and the archetype of Lilith and see where she might support you. Until next time, here's to your
next time.
Redesign.
Take care.
Bye.